You never forget the moment it hits you. The moment when the smile that once made you feel safe suddenly feels dangerous. When the laughter you used to cherish starts to sound like manipulation, echoing in your ears. When you realize that the person you trusted most, the one you opened up to, leaned on, built your world around is the very reason your world is now crumbling. That moment is shattering. And for many, it comes too late. Maya never saw it coming. A gifted young designer in Chicago, she met Ethan at a networking event downtown. Charming, witty, endlessly supportive, he was everything she thought a business partner should be. Within months, they launched a startup together. At first it was magic. Ethan celebrated her wins, amplified her ideas, and always had a plan. But then things started slipping. Clients ghosted her. Her contributions were edited out of pitch decks. Meetings were canceled without her knowing. And when she confronted Ethan, he always had a perfectly crafted excuse. "Oh, I thought I told you." "Or you must have misunderstood." It wasn't until a client accidentally forwarded her an email that revealed Ethan had been taking full credit behind her back, that the truth slammed into her like a punch to the chest. This isn't just Maya's story. It could be yours. It could be happening right now. You wouldn't even know it, because evil doesn't always show up wearing horns and breathing fire. Sometimes it wears a three-piece suit. Sometimes it tells jokes at dinner parties and charms your friends. Sometimes it walks into your life looking like the answer to your loneliness, your ambition, your hope. And then, once it's close enough, it begins to hollow you out. But here's the truth the Stoics knew long before modern psychology caught up. Appearances lie. Charm can be a tool, and those who wield it well, who exploit it to manipulate, to dominate, to destroy, are often the hardest to see coming. In this video, we're going to peel back the mask. We'll explore 5 subtle yet powerful signs that you may be dealing with an evil person, and why recognizing them could save your sanity, your peace of mind, and in some cases, even your life. We'll use the timeless wisdom of Stoicism to guide us. Principles from thinkers like Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus, who believed in reason, virtue, and clarity as the only true defenses against chaos. If you've ever walked away from a conversation, feeling smaller, without knowing why, if you've ever doubted your own memory in a friendship, if you've felt suffocated by someone who claimed to love you, then stay with me, because by the end of this video, you won't just be able to spot the signs, you'll know exactly how to protect your mind, your boundaries, and your soul from the people who only pretend to care. But before we dive in, do me a small favor. Subscribe to this channel. It's free, and it helps us create more in-depth, thoughtful content like this. Your support gives us the motivation to keep going, and, believe me, what's coming next is something you won't want to miss. Now, before we move forward, I have a quick question for you. Let's test your instincts. Question. You meet someone new. They're fun, engaging, and seem genuinely interested in your life. But within weeks, they're making subtle jokes at your expense in public and always steering the conversation back to themselves. What do you do? A. Give them more time. Maybe you're being overly sensitive. B. Step back and start observing more critically. Let me know in the comments, A or B. Your answer might reveal more about your boundaries than you think. Let's continue. Lucas had a way of making everyone feel like the most important person in the room. It was his superpower, or, at least, that's how it seemed. When he arrived in San Francisco, he was just another newcomer trying to find his footing. But within weeks, he had charmed his way into every social circle, business meet, and community event imaginable. People didn't just like Lucas, they admired him. They invited him to speak, to lead, to collaborate. He made them laugh. He made them feel seen. He made them believe he was exactly what they'd been waiting for. But for those who spent enough time around him, those who started connecting the dots, a different picture emerged. Lucas didn't just light up rooms. He absorbed their attention like a black hole. The compliments he offered often carried a subtle edge, like he was lifting you up only to remind you he was still standing higher. His laughter was warm, but it always followed the same pattern. He laughed at others, not with them. And the more you paid attention, the more you realized his generosity was strategic, not sincere. He gave when people were watching. He offered help when it bought him praise. And when someone else started to shine, he'd slowly turn the spotlight back on himself. This is the charisma paradox. The most dangerous people don't wear a scowl. They don't rage in public or boast loudly. Instead, they show up with charm. So smooth it feels like trust. But trust built on performance is not trust, it's illusion. The Stoics knew this kind of illusion well. Epictetus warned us not to be carried away by the first impression. He taught that clarity, not comfort, should guide our interactions. That just because someone seems good doesn't mean they are good. Lucas was a master of first impressions, but what he lacked was consistency. He praised your ideas but always offered a better one. He remembered your birthday but posted it online for validation. He listened to your problems but never shared his own. Over time, the balance began to tilt. Conversations became one-sided. You left feeling drained, not energized. Somehow, your victories felt smaller around him, your voice quieter. That's not a coincidence. That's design. People like Lucas don't just want to be liked, they want to be needed. They want to be admired. And if that means dulling your shine to make theirs brighter, they'll do it with a smile on their face and a compliment on their lips. The Stoics would tell us this: learn to watch the patterns, not the performances. Anyone can act kind. Anyone can act wise. But it's in the spaces between the little reactions, the inconsistencies, the stories they tell when they think no one's listening, that the truth reveals itself. Want a way to spot a Lucas in your life? Try this. After spending time with someone new, sit quietly with yourself. Ask, did I feel heard? Or was I just another audience member? Did this person uplift me or just perform well in my presence? You'll be surprised how quickly your intuition sharpens when you give it space. Another practice. Observe how they treat people who can't offer them anything in return. The waiter, the assistant, the person on the sidelines. True character doesn't show when people are watching, it shows when they're not. Charisma is not the problem. There are kind, authentic, naturally magnetic people in this world. But charisma without character is a weapon, and those who use it to manipulate are often the hardest to walk away from, because they made you feel like the best version of yourself before they slowly took that version apart. Lucas didn't steal from people. He didn't scream or threaten, but in every room he entered, someone else left feeling smaller. That's the signature of the charismatic chameleon, not that they shine, but that others begin to dim in their presence. So if someone in your life always seems too perfect, too present, too polished, ask yourself this: are they genuinely connected, or are they just adapting to gain your trust? Because in a world obsessed with appearances, Stoicism teaches us the rarest form of clarity, to look past the charm and into the core. And if that core doesn't align with truth, humility, and virtue, no amount of charisma can make it safe. Jordan had always been the type of person people leaned on. As a nurse in a busy Miami hospital, empathy wasn't just part of her job, was part of who she was. She listened, she cared, she held space for others, even when her own heart was heavy. So when her new roommate, Tasha, moved in, it felt like a relief to finally have someone to lean on to. At first, Tasha seemed open and kind. They bonded over late-night conversations, wine-fueled heart-to-hearts, and shared frustrations about life. But the first time Jordan cried in front of her, something shifted. It was after a brutal 12-hour shift in the ER, after watching a patient pass away in her arms. She came home, sat down on the couch, and simply let the tears fall. Tasha looked at her, almost confused, then said flatly, "You're too emotional. You should toughen up." That moment, quiet and sharp, cut deeper than any argument. Jordan brushed it off at first. Maybe Tasha just didn't know how to comfort people. But it wasn't just that one night. Over the weeks and months that followed, Tasha's reactions began to paint a clearer picture. Whenever Jordan expressed pain, Tasha minimized it. When Jordan shared good news, Tasha changed the subject. And when Jordan needed help, Tasha disappeared. This was no longer about mismatched communication styles. It was about something darker, complete absence of empathy. The Stoics never used the word empathy the way we do today, but their teachings are steeped in its essence. Marcus Aurelius wrote often about the interconnectedness of human beings, the duty we have to one another, and the idea that to care for others is to care for ourselves. Stoicism teaches us that virtue lies in compassion, not in cold detachment, but there's a dangerous kind of person who views empathy as a weakness. To them, vulnerability is an inconvenience, emotions are liabilities, and compassion is a performance at best. These people don't just struggle with empathy, they reject it entirely. The empathy void shows up in 1,000 small ways. The friend who yawns when you're pouring your heart out, the partner who makes jokes about your insecurities, the coworker who steps over you to get ahead without a second thought. These aren't just signs of bad manners or poor communication. They're indicators of a deeper emotional vacancy, one that can silently destroy your self-esteem. Over chimney, empathy is what binds us. It's what allows relationships to grow, to heal, to deepen. Without it, everything becomes transactional. Everything becomes conditional. And when you're in a relationship with someone who lacks it, whether it's a friend, a colleague, or someone you love, it can feel like you're screaming into the void, hoping for an echo that never comes. The Stoics would tell us not to expect the world to give us back what we offer, but they would also tell us to choose our companions wisely. Epictetus taught that we become like the people we surround ourselves with. If someone in your life constantly invalidates your feelings, mocks your struggles, or disappears when you need them, they're not just lacking empathy, they're corroding your inner peace. And here's the twist. People like this often camouflage themselves well. They might use buzzwords like emotional boundaries or tough love to justify their detachment. They might pose as strong, unshakable, even enlightened. But strength without kindness is not strength. It's hardness. It's emotional exile disguised as self-control. True empathy isn't about solving someone's problems. It's about sitting with them in silence, holding space for their grief, celebrating their wins without envy, and simply being present. And you don't need to be a philosopher to recognize when it's missing. You just need to listen to how your heart responds when you're around them. Do you feel heard? Do you feel lighter? Do you feel lonelier than when you walked in? In Jordan's case, she eventually made the difficult decision to move out. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't angry. It was quiet, peaceful, a reclaiming of space, of energy, of worth. And in doing so, she embodied the very Stoic principle she had forgotten, that we are not obligated to remain in places that diminish us. You are allowed to expect empathy. You are allowed to walk away when it's not offered. That is not selfish. That is wisdom. And if someone repeatedly proves they cannot offer that empathy, they make you feel too much, too needy, too human. It's not your job to become less. It's your job to become free. Anna had always believed in second chances. As a community organizer in Boston, she built her life around helping people rise. So when Dylan entered her world, a fellow activist, passionate, and seemingly wounded by past betrayals, Nay did what she always did. She offered space, support, trust. At first, Dylan seemed like the perfect collaborator. He shared her vision, praised her work, and constantly reminded her how grateful he was to be part of her mission. But soon, the undercurrents began. The subtle guilt trips, the comments that twisted compliments into obligations. "I wouldn't be able to do this without you," he'd say, then act distant and cold if she took a day off. When she said no to a request, even kindly, his energy would shift. He wouldn't argue. but the silence afterwards spoke louder than words. Manipulation rarely enters loudly. It doesn't shout, it whispers. It uses confusion instead of confrontation. It makes you question yourself while the manipulator remains calmly in control. Dylan wasn't overtly cruel. He didn't yell, didn't threaten, but he had a way of reshaping reality so subtly that Anna often wondered if she was the one being selfish. He would recount past conversations differently than she remembered. He'd remind her of all he'd done for her in moments when she tried to set a boundary, and when she tried to confront the dynamic, he'd respond with, "You're just being too sensitive," or, "I don't know where this is coming from." It wore her down. Slowly, consistently. This is the hallmark of manipulation. It's not a sudden storm, it's a slow erosion of your clarity. You lose track of your instincts, your voice, your confidence. The manipulator never lifts a hand, but somehow you feel pushed, pressured, and pinned. The Stoics had a word for this kind of mental entanglement: distortion. They believed that peace comes not from escaping reality, but from seeing it clearly. Epictetus warned against those who try to hijack our perception, who twist our thoughts so that we no longer trust ourselves. First say to yourself what you would be, he said, and then do what you have to do. Anna began to realize she was no longer herself. She had become reactive, unsure, emotionally dependent on Dylan's approval. She began to anticipate his reactions before even making a choice. That's when she knew she needed to reclaim her mind, to break free from a manipulator. Clarity is your first weapon, and clarity is built in quiet moments. Anna started a new habit. After each conversation with Dylan, she would sit down and journal not what he said, but how she felt. Empowered, guilty, confused. It became quickly evident that her feelings never aligned with her intentions. That's when the fog began to lift. Manipulators are often skilled actors. They know how to play victim when needed, how to use flattery as currency, how to guilt you into action and then call it love. But the Stoics remind us that actions consistent, observable behavior are the truest measure of character. Words are wind. Behavior is bedrock. Anna noticed how Dylan treated people. He couldn't benefit from cold, dismissive, condescending. She remembered the times he'd shown up for her only when others were watching, and most painfully, she saw how little he offered in return when she truly needed support. What made it difficult was the history, the good times, the shared goals. But as Seneca once wrote, the most disgraceful kind of loss is that which is due to carelessness. Ignoring manipulation isn't kindness, it's self-abandonment. Anna didn't cut Dylan off with rage. She didn't confront him with a speech. She simply stopped feeding the dynamic. She became clear in her decisions, firm in her boundaries, and uninterested in defending her truth. When Dylan sensed he could no longer pull her strings, he pulled away. And that silence, once so painful, became peace. Manipulation only works when you're willing to doubt yourself. But once you reclaim your clarity, you become unmovable. Not hard, not angry, just rooted. The Stoics don't tell us to hate manipulators. They tell us to see them, and once we do, to return our attention to the only thing we ever truly control: how we live, how we think, how we respond. Anna learned that it's not cruel to stop being someone's puppet. It's wise, it's necessary, and it's the beginning of becoming someone no one can quietly control again. Daniel never thought of himself as someone who would lose control of his own life. He was independent, driven, and grounded. But when he met Mia, all of that began to shift so subtly that he didn't even notice it was happening. At first she was everything he thought a great partner should: be thoughtful, attentive, and incredibly organized. She always had recommendations for where to go, what to eat, even which people they should spend time with. Daniel found comfort in her confidence. After years of dating uncertainty, being with someone so sure of everything felt like a relief. But the certainty soon started to overshadow his choices. When he suggested a restaurant, she dismissed it without discussion. When he wanted to see an old friend, she'd question why he still needed them in his life. Her tone was never aggressive, but always framed as concern. I just want what's best for you. I think you'll be happier if you let me handle it. I'm only looking out for us. The word us became a tool, not a connection. Control doesn't always come with yelling or ultimatums. Sometimes it arrives as care that feels a little too tight, as decisions made for you that seem logical, even helpful. It's in the gentle erosion of your preferences, your friendships, your freedom. And by the time you realize how small your world has become, it feels like your voice no longer belongs to you. Daniel stopped suggesting plans altogether. It wasn't worth the passive sighs or the subtle shame that followed. He began second-guessing every text he sent, every dollar he spent. Even his clothing choices shifted first, gradually, then completely. It wasn't that Mia had told him who to be. It was that she made it clear, over time, who not to be. The Stoics spoke clearly about the value of autonomy. To the Stoic mind, freedom is not about defiance. It's about alignment with reason and integrity. Epictetus reminded us that no man is free who is not master of himself. When we surrender that mastery under the guise of harmony, we're not loving, we're disappearing. Control freaks often operate in the language of love. They'll say, I just want to protect you, or I know you better than anyone. They make you question whether your desires are immature, your instincts flawed, and perhaps the most disarming part is that they often believe their own words. They may truly think they're helping, but intention does not excuse impact. Daniel found himself isolated from his own life, his routines, his relationships, his sense of direction. When he spoke with his sister on the phone one evening, she asked, "What do you want?" He didn't know how to answer, not because he had too many choices, but because he had none left that hadn't been filtered through Mia's expectations. That moment cracked something open. Control wears many faces: emotional manipulation, financial domination, spiritual superiority, even faux self-sacrifice. Mia had taken over their finances, saying it would be easier if one of us just handled everything. She'd begun speaking for him in social settings, making commitments he hadn't agreed to, explaining his behavior as if she knew better. Daniel's just tired, she'd say. He's always like this. And over time, Daniel had started believing it too. Stoicism demands that we live according to our nature, not someone else's script. Seneca taught that we should not let another's will override our own, for that is the beginning of slavery. In spirit, if not in law. Daniel began taking small steps. He reconnected with a friend without asking. He said no to an invitation without offering an excuse. He picked his own clothes, just because. Each act was tiny, almost unnoticeable. It felt like breathing again. Eventually, he had the hard conversation. He told Mia he needed space to rediscover his voice. She didn't react with rage, but with sorrow. And that was the most dangerous moment of all. Because guilt, not anger, is how control often hooks you back in. But Daniel held firm, because he had remembered something essential. Love doesn't erase you. It sees you, respects you, makes room for who you are, not who someone else needs you to be. In the quiet aftermath, he reread a quote that had once meant nothing to him, but now burned with clarity. He who is brave is free, not brave with fists or shouting, brave in standing still and saying, "This is mine, my life, my choice, my path." And that is how control loses its grip, not with rage, but with remembrance. Leila had always been good at giving people the benefit of the doubt. As an event planner in Austin, she dealt with unpredictability, daily last-minute cancellations, miscommunications, excuses. She knew how to adjust, how to stay calm in the chaos, but nothing could have prepared her for the slow, disorienting unraveling that came with being close to someone who lied as effortlessly as breathing. Clara was her closest friend for over a year. Bright, bold, and full of stories, she lit up every room they entered together. People loved Clara and so did Leila. At first, their friendship felt like a safe harbor. Clara listened, laughed, and encouraged Leila's dreams. But then, small inconsistencies started to surface. A borrowed dress that Clara swore she never touched, only to wear it days later. A dinner invitation that Leila supposedly declined, though she had no memory of it. Text messages that were never received, until screenshots said otherwise. The lies were never big at first. Just enough to make Leila doubt her memory. Just enough to make her feel off balance. This is the power of the pathological liar, not the lie itself, but the psychological dislocation it creates. You begin to wonder if you're too forgetful, too emotional, too demanding. They never raise their voice. They never openly deceive with malice. Instead, they spin their version of reality with such ease and consistency that soon, yours starts to feel like the fiction. The Stoics were fierce advocates for clarity. To them, truth wasn't optional, it was foundational. Seneca wrote that the first step toward wisdom is the desire for truth. But what happens when you're bound to someone whose life is built on illusion? The greatest danger of a pathological liar is not just the stories they tell, but the trust they slowly dismantle. They often blur truth with half-truths, mixing in just enough reality to make the lie palatable. They may play the victim to deflect blame. They shift their narratives so fluidly that even when you catch them in a contradiction, they turn it into another layer of manipulation. You must have misunderstood me. That's not what I meant. You're twisting my words. Leila didn't want to believe it at first. She wanted to hold on to the version of Clara that had once felt like a sister. But over time, the weight of doubt became impossible to ignore. The trust she had given freely began to suffocate her. Every conversation felt like a test. Every compliment sounded rehearsed. Every apology felt like a setup. That's when Leila turned inward and found her way back to the Stoic foundation she had once studied in college. She remembered something. Marcus Aurelius had written, "If someone can prove me wrong and show me my mistake, I will gladly change. It is the truth I seek." Leila realized that in her desire to preserve the friendship, she had sacrificed the truth. And once you do that, you stop living in reality. You begin performing in someone else's story. Boundaries became her path to freedom. Not dramatic ultimatums or angry confrontations, but calm, precise, self-respecting lines. She stopped explaining herself. She started keeping a journal, noting inconsistencies. She began trusting what she saw, rather than what she was told. When Clara lied again, Leila didn't argue. She just stopped engaging. Pathological liars depend on one thing above all: your continued participation in their theater. They thrive on your confusion, your need for closure, your habit of giving second and third chances. But boundaries are the stage lights going dark. When you refuse to perform, their script falls apart. Leila didn't need revenge. She didn't need an apology that would have been just another fabrication. What she needed and finally chose: peace. She crafted a boundary statement she never delivered aloud, but lived by. I do not negotiate with dishonesty. I protect my peace. I walk with truth. Stoicism doesn't teach us to cut people off at the first sign of imperfection. It teaches us to recognize what nourishes our soul and what corrupts it. Boundaries aren't punishment, they're preservation. They aren't walls, they're windows that open to the kind of life we actually want to build. In the months after distancing herself from Clara, Leila found herself more grounded, more certain. The second-guessing stopped. The mental fog lifted. She reconnected with people who made her feel safe and seen. And she began trusting herself again, not because she was flawless, but because she was finally listening to her instincts without apology. Stoicism reminds us that truth, virtue, and clarity are not just philosophical ideals. They are emotional necessities. To live without them is to drift endlessly. But when we embrace them, we become anchored in something unshakable. Leila's greatest act of strength wasn't calling Clara out. It was walking away without needing to be understood. Sometimes, protecting your peace means never hearing the apology. It means becoming the closure you were waiting for. And in doing so, you remind yourself and anyone watching that your truth isn't up for debate. Each story, we've explored Maya in Chicago, Lucas in San Francisco, Jordan in Miami, Anna in Boston, Daniel in Seattle, and Leila in Austin, reveals a different face of toxicity, manipulation, and deception. These weren't grand villains in dark rooms, plotting chaos. They were everyday people, hiding their intentions behind charm, concern, or charisma. And they entered the lives of our characters slowly, almost lovingly, until the damage became undeniable. Maya trusted a charismatic partner who stole not just her ideas, but her sense of worth. Lucas won admiration everywhere he went, but left behind a trail of insecurity and self-doubt. Jordan opened her heart, only to be met with cold indifference from someone who couldn't or wouldn't feel. Anna poured herself into someone who used guilt and gaslighting to control her every move. Daniel's love story became a slow suffocation, his freedom slipping through his fingers in the name of care. And Leila, the loyal friend, was left dizzy by a web of lies that made her question reality itself. What ties all these stories together isn't just betrayal, it's the subtle, quiet erosion of self. These weren't crashes, they were slow leaks, and that's what makes these people the deceivers, the manipulators, the ones who pretend to love but need to control so dangerous. They don't just hurt you, they hollow you out. But here's what's more important. Each character didn't stay there. They chose awareness over denial. They chose clarity over confusion, and when it mattered most, they chose themselves not from a place of ego, but from a place of courage. In the teachings of Stoicism, we are reminded time and time again that the only thing fully within our control is ourselves, our mind, our reactions, our integrity. We cannot stop people from lying, manipulating, or controlling, but we can choose how much space they take up in our lives. We can choose how clearly we see. We can choose when it's time to say, enough. That's what Stoicism offers. Not coldness, but clarity. Not detachment, but discernment. The ability to say, this situation does not align with my values, and to walk away not because you're cruel, but because you finally remembered you are allowed to protect your peace. So what are the lessons we take from all of this? First, trust your inner signals. When something feels wrong, don't silence it. Journal it. Sit with it. Observe it. Your body often knows long before your mind does. Second, charm is not the same as character. Someone who speaks well and dresses well is not necessarily someone who wishes you well. Let actions, not performances, be your guide. Third, empathy is not a luxury. It is a basic requirement for healthy relationships. If someone consistently lacks it, you are not obligated to fill in the gap. Fourth, boundaries are not walls, they're windows. They let the right people in and keep the wrong ones out. If someone pushes against your boundaries, they're showing you who they really are. Fifth, your peace is not selfish. Your clarity is not rude. Your standards are not unreasonable. They are your protection, and you never have to apologize for upholding them. Finally, the people who manipulate, lie, and control do not deserve endless explanation or endless access to your life. They deserve distance, and you deserve to heal. You can start small. Reclaim your space. Reclaim your voice. Reclaim your time. And remember, you are not here to make everyone comfortable. You are here to live a life of integrity, courage, and truth. Now, I want to ask you something, not just as a viewer, but as someone who has probably experienced at least a piece of one of these stories. Which of these signs resonated with you the most? Was it the charismatic manipulator? The empathy void? The gaslighter? or maybe the controlling partner? Comment below with your thoughts, B, C, D, or even write your own story. Your voice might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. Let's make this comment section a place of healing, of insight, and of solidarity, because you're not alone, and your clarity might give someone else the courage to take their next step. If this message spoke to you, if these stories felt familiar or helped you name something you felt for a long time, please consider subscribing to the channel. It's a simple gesture, but it fuels our ability to keep creating content that matters, that heals, and that empowers. Thank you for being here. Stay strong, stay wise, and above all, stay grounded in your truth.